Take out an ad in a local paper, a cheap ad. Put your email in it. Say, self-sufficient community forming, and see how many people reply. I guarantee you, you'll get at least 100 replies in the next 2 or 3 months if you put a little ad in the paper. There are quite a few sites now that are talking about communities, establishing local communities, right? And all of them are going to fail. And you know why? Because their mood, their idea is the same as the current system. Let's enjoy the material world. As soon as you have this attitude of enjoying the material world, you're doomed to failure. You know why? That's the same idea that's behind the current system. So why are you going to make the same mistakes all over again? What value is that? If you're going to do something according to a system that actually works, not a system that results in failure. We know that the current system results in failure because that's where we're at right now. So if we're going to have a civilization that works, it has to be based on spiritual principles, not material principles. And I'm not talking about religious principles. Because a religion, the first thing that a religion does is it says, these people are part of the religion, and these other people are not part of the religion. See? But we say, we take everybody. We accept everybody, as long as they're willing to practice our principles. And our principles are no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling or speculation, which means acceptance of the Vedic scriptures and chanting the holy name. It's not a religion. It's a spiritual path. It's not a religion. It's an esoteric school. You see? We don't have beliefs. We have knowledge. We don't have creeds. We have practices. You see? It's a difference between, we don't ask for faith. What we ask is that you do the experiment and you observe your own consciousness and see if the result is there. And everybody who tries the experiment and does it properly will get the result. This is scientific. This is repeatable. You see? This is real science, spiritual science. How can science, any kind of science, exist without a theory of consciousness? Because in science, you're supposed to observe. Right? You do an experiment, or you go out in nature and you observe. Who is the observer? Or what is the observer? Consciousness. You see why consciousness is so important? But science today does not have a standard, accurate theory of consciousness. Well, what do I mean by that? A real theory, an accurate theory, would allow you to predict the changes in consciousness. And they have no theory like that. Not in psychology, not in sociology, not in politics, not anywhere. Actually, the theory of science, or the philosophy of science itself, should be based on a theory of consciousness, because the consciousness is the observer. And without the concept of an observer, science itself is meaningless. They want to say that, oh, we have our measuring instruments, we have our machines, and they're observing the results of the experiment. But somebody has to read the machine. Somebody has to design the experiment, even more importantly. Someone has to determine how the measurements are going to be taken, and that is really what determines the results. All that is a function of consciousness. So people claim to be scientific, and that's why they don't believe in God. But there is no science without the concept of an observer. And if you can't define what the observer is, then your science is meaningless. It's meaningless. So what's happened is that modern science has led us down a blind path to where we have all this information about all kinds of physical processes, but it's not linked with the well-being of the observer. You see? The actual purpose of science should be to make our lives better. But it hasn't made our lives better. It's made our lives worse because we have ignored the science of consciousness. So here we have a bunch of animals who can't control their senses, who can't control their minds, who have no control over their consciousness, and they have nuclear weapons. Great. That's the result of our science. What kind of science is that? Huh? That's stupid. It's stupid. Because we have ignored the science of the scientist. If the scientist is a rascal and he discovers nuclear weapons, then what's the use of that discovery? It's only going to harm everybody. If a scientist himself is a rascal and has no spiritual principles, no ethical principles, then he's going to discover all kinds of harmful things. Or he's going to apply his discoveries in a harmful way. You see? This is the point. We have a whole society dedicated to the idea of giving up responsibility over the quality of our own lives to some impersonal organization or corporate group. Anybody who buys into this gets cheated, because that's what it's all about. What is a corporation anyway? A corporation, you hear, like, especially in British corporations, such and such corporation limited. But what does limited mean? It means limited liability. What is liability? Liability is if you cause harm to someone, then you can be sued for the damages. You see? But the very nature of a corporation is that it limits the liability of the founders and the executives and the shareholders. In other words, you can do something harmful, but you can't be sued. This is legalized criminal activity. You see? We can do harm to people, we can do harm to others, but we can't be sued. We can't be penalized for the harm that we do. That's the actual nature and purpose of a corporation. So as soon as a corporation, what they do is they take something that formerly was free, which was produced within the local community and which was traded by local exchanges of value, and they monetize it. They monetize it. They make it a matter of business item. You see, we have to pay money for it. Before, you could trade your corn for your neighbor's soap. Now you have to trade your corn for money, and then trade the money for the corporation's soap. And then they take away the value of your corn, because the soap that they produce is based on taking the workers who make soap and then adding something to the price of their labor, which is called profit. So they charge more for the soap than the soap is actually worth. You have to pay more in terms of cash for the soap than if you paid for it directly in corn. That's how a corporation works. So it sucks the wealth out of the people and puts it in the pockets of the capitalists. Try to understand. That's what a corporation is for. That's why it's limited liability. So the people who profit from it can't be sued. Try to understand. The more you cooperate with this corporation business, the more you become impoverished, a slave. Huh? And you have to measure everything you do in terms of its cash value. And that gives them, by setting prices, that gives them the ability